Well, the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, the white police officer charged in the murder of George Floyd, began this week. Chauvin was seen in a viral video kneeling on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, causing his death. Floyd's demise led to a series of police brutality protests by tens of thousands of people around the world. Here to speak on the impact this trial will have on the police force's treatment of the black minority is U.S. Attorney with experience as a defense counsel in both state and U.S. federal courts, Asukwo Mendie Archibong. Asukwo, welcome to the morning show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so very much for having me, and good morning.
Good morning. Well, this trial centers on 3 charges: murder in the 2nd degree, murder in the 3rd degree, and 2nd-degree manslaughter. When we look at this from a legal point of view, are these charges there to increase the possibility of conviction come verdict?
Yes, let's just step back and look at what the charges really are. Now, Derek Chauvin was not charged with first-degree murder, which would have required proving intent to kill George Floyd. It's almost impossible to show intent beyond a reasonable doubt to kill a person by a police officer. So they went for the lesser charges of 2nd-degree murder, 3rd-degree murder, and 2nd-degree manslaughter. Now, so that people can really just follow along, let's see what the 2nd-degree murder here. Understand that the laws are different in the different states of the United States. In Minnesota, it's different. 2nd-degree murder just speaks to the prosecutors have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Derek Chauvin assaulted George Floyd and caused his loss of life. And that should be while assaulting him. So just 2 things have to be proven beyond reasonable doubt: the assault and a loss of life. They don't have to show any intention to kill. Now, the 3rd-degree murder, generally, the prosecutors have to also prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, mark that standard. Beyond a reasonable doubt that Derek Chauvin perpetrated an act, that would be the first element that they have to show, that was eminently dangerous to others. That would be the 2nd element. And then the 3rd one, evincing a depraved mind. That would be the 3rd element. And the last one would be without regard to human life. So they have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Derek Chauvin perpetrated an act eminently dangerous to others with a depraved mind and without regard to human life. Now, when you come down to manslaughter, they brought it down to 2nd-degree manslaughter. They just have to show beyond reasonable doubt culpable negligence on the part of Derek Chauvin and unreasonable act on the part of Derek Chauvin as well. All the defense have to do is to show the element of doubt. That means if any of the jurors says, I don't believe A, B, or C, then there is no conviction. So let's also now look at when I say jurors, let's look at what the jury system really is in one sentence. Just 12 persons similarly placed in the community as the defendant, who will now come to take a vote as to the guilt or non-guilt of the defendant. And for there to be a conviction, every single juror, every single one of the 12 have to vote for the conviction on each of the charges, there being 3 charges. If one person on any charge says, I don't have a reasonable doubt and I vote no, then there is no conviction.
Thank you. I actually wanted to come here. I wanted to come in on that. You made the point very rightly that jurors, their decision must be unanimous. Everybody has to agree for a guilty verdict to be able to be put through. But when we look at the specifics of this case, it involves police, it involves race in America. When you add all of those mixings into this situation, how likely do you think a conviction is going to be, even with video evidence?
It's always an uphill task to convict a member of the police force in the United States. You remember in 1984, the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. I mean, we had video evidence. That was the first time there was video evidence of the beating of a black man. Yet, we were unable to get a conviction. With, with the killing of black people, black men most especially, it's always difficult to get a conviction. If that killing is at the hands of another race, even more difficult to get a conviction if it is at the hands of the police. Remember Trevor Martin. In the history of the state of Minnesota and also in Minneapolis Police Department, we've only had one conviction of a police officer, and that was on third-degree murder. And let's look at that, at why that police officer was convicted. He was originally from Ethiopia. He had just moved to the United States, applied to the Minneapolis Police Department, and in the course of carrying out his duty, he shot a woman, and it happened to be a white woman. And for the first time, his name was Mohammed Noor. For the first time, a police officer was convicted for the killing of a person in an MPD. Now we come to the instant case of George Floyd. You have to show beyond a reasonable doubt. And even when you've shown beyond a reasonable doubt that all of these things occurred, the police officer has certain protections that members of the public do not have. What are these protections? One, you now have to go again and show that his actions were unreasonable when placed beside the actions of a reasonable police officer.
Okay. All right.
That is the last step.
So we've seen emotions in the first few days of this trial beginning. We're now beginning to see powerful testimonies. Yesterday, we saw the longest-serving police officer in Minneapolis testify that the force used by Derek Chauvin was unnecessary and uncalled for. And from the opening statements of the prosecution and the defense counsels, we have a fair idea of where they're both going. How easy would it be? I mean, the jurors are seeing this video and different angles, body cams are now being shown, never before seen footage. They say a picture holds 1,000 words, and this is a video playing a picture in the minds of these jurors. How easy would it be for the defense to punch holes in that? In other words, how well is the prosecution making their case so far?
They are doing a fantastic job. Now, what they first did was they stated in their opening statement, the Attorney General of the state, Keith Ellis, said, we will show that George Floyd was killed at the hands of Derek Chauvin, and that Derek Chauvin's actions were unreasonable, and that led to the death of George Floyd. They're doing a fantastic job. You'll notice that they are rotating. There are about 4 of them. One small tidbit is that 2 of the prosecutors are actually volunteers. They are doing it pro bono. Schlechter is actually a former U.S. attorney and very, very skilled at what he's doing. You also notice that it appears there is only one defense counsel. That is just for the jury to see and make it appear as if it is Goliath versus David. Eric Nelson, who is the defense counsel, has 14 attorneys behind him sitting outside of the courtroom. Now, the challenge is not showing the video and evincing some level of intense emotions from people in the courtroom and outside of the court. The challenge and where the ambush is, as defense counsel in criminal cases, where the ambush is showing causation. Notice that the defense is doing a great job so far, and they've not presented their case. They are doing a great job in jabbing and keeping the prosecution at bay. Why do I say so? Their argument is, no, Derek Chauvin didn't cause the death of George Floyd. He had drugs in his system, and those drugs caused his death. So ultimately, it's going to be a battle of the experts down the line. The defense wants to get away from this emotional questioning and state as quickly as possible. That's why they didn't question some of the witnesses, and some of their cross-examinations have been very minimal. They want to get away as quickly as possible. They want to get away from the process as quickly as possible. When you talked about the longest-serving police officer, number one police officer and MPD, Lieutenant Zimmerman, he said it was unlawful. Yes. But the defense is, when it presents its own case, it's going to say, hey, he had opioid in his system, he had heroin in his system, he has been a long-term user of drugs. He actually was admitted into the hospital for drug overdose. Those around him have been using drugs. He used drugs just a week before his encounter with the police that led to his death. Now, here is a case of excited delirium. He didn't die from the knee of Derek Chauvin. He died because his system was already too weak to handle any form of stress. And he died because of the drugs that he had been using. He died because in the last 2-3 months, he used drugs, opioids purchased from the street, which is inherently more dangerous than those purchased from the people that have bought them, that have had a prescription for them. So that is where you're going to see the actual legal battle. Right now, the prosecution is winning the hearts and minds of the people. Even I became so sad, so uncomfortable seeing the knee on the neck and realizing, no, it was not 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It was actually 9 minutes and 29 seconds to have your knee on the neck of the person. But where the battle is going to come down to is going to be causation. The prosecution is fantastic. They've done a fantastic job. They have, to some extent, and really to a great extent, kind of push aside the sting of the drug used by George Floyd when they presented evidence from his girlfriend, and she testified as to their drug use. And therefore, even if the jury gets to hear, members of the jury gets to hear again the presentation of the drug use by the defense, the prosecution has already controlled the initial narrative. And when you're talking about the drug use, it was opioid. Now, opioid is more used by the Caucasians, by the white people in the United States. And you're going to have greater sense of sympathy for George Floyd in that instance. If you're talking of marijuana, heroin, and some other drugs mainly used by black people, you'll find out that the legal system has a disparity in the sentencing guidelines for different types of drugs, believe it or not. And you're going to have members of the jury, maybe some persons within that jury might actually say, yes, my cousin has had to use this, my sister has had to use this, and look at the position for the drug use of George Floyd as well testified to by his girlfriend.
Understood.
The
Obviously, we can't
of
preempt or predict what the verdict will be.
Yeah.
But using that example that you just used, sadly, Asukwa, we have run out of time. Asukwa Archibong is an attorney who's just been able to talk to us about the impact of the Derek Chauvin trial accused of the murder of George Floyd. Thank you very much for joining us.